and good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new Affinity webinar episode in collaboration with UN Youth New South Wales. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting tonight. I am currently on the land of the Bidjigal people of the Darug and Eora nations. I encourage you to reflect upon the customs and practices of the traditional owners upon whose land you are currently on. It is a privilege to be meeting with you on First Nations land, particularly as NAIDOC Week has just come to an end. We reaffirm our commitment to healing country through reconciliation, Aboriginal sovereignty, and justice. We pay our respects to First Nations elders, past, present, and to all descendants who have cared for this place since creation. We also honour and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us today. Before we get started tonight, my name is Stephanie Sekalovska. I am the UN Youth New South Wales President. My role within the organisation is not only to ensure that we run as many educational events and programs for young people as possible, but more importantly, to advance the strategic direction of UN Youth New South Wales to equip students with the skills needed to create tangible change. These are the kinds of skills that empower young people within their own communities, networks, and day-to-day lives. World Youth Skills Day, as declared by the United Nations General Assembly, takes place today on July 15th. It is a day to celebrate the strategic importance of equipping young people with skills for employment, decent work, and entrepreneurship. Today highlights the opportunities and challenges that young people face in employment. Young people are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults, be exposed to more unsafe working conditions, and be at risk of being exposed to wage theft and unstable incomes, affecting their capacity to access safe and stable housing, healthcare, and food. While education, training, and employment are often considered to be a linear pipeline, the automation of jobs, competitive open market, and limited entry-level opportunities allowing young people with qualifications to seek experience have been affecting their ability to secure employment opportunities. Skills and jobs for youth feature prominently in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and SDG Target 4.4 calls for a substantial increase in the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills. The pandemic has seen severe impacts on the economy, with the highest burden borne by the young people who have lost jobs. We are joined by a panel who will discuss what it means to be a young person in our current economic climate, what job insecurity means for our future, and what is the way out of this for youth moving forward. Without further ado, I would now like to introduce today's distinguished facilitator, Omar Dehen. Omar is an award-winning journalist for SBS World News, reporting from around the country and across the globe. Proud of his Syrian heritage, he is passionate about foreign affairs, multiculturalism, and promoting social unity. Before joining SBS in 2015, Omar worked at 10 News, Sky News, and News Corp. Welcome, Omar.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Stephanie. I'm not sure about distinguished, but we'll see maybe in an hour's time. And for our viewers tonight, I want to thank you for joining us for this really, I'm hoping, insightful conversation, and particularly during this unusual, albeit unfamiliar, but unsurprising period that we're currently in, particularly for people in Greater Sydney. For those of you in lockdown, I hope you're all doing well. But for those of you in Greater Sydney, I know you have nowhere else to be, so I'm glad you're with us. And without further ado, this is my first webinar, and let's go with it. So young people make up around 1/4 of the global workforce, a really significant statistic there. So this year's World Youth Skills Day again takes place in this challenging context that's in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and with education and training systems yet to return to pre-existing conditions. And like every generation before them, the current cohort of global youth will be concerned with finding employment, but even more so now as they face an uncertain and challenging landscape. And as we're seeing in recent times, it just keeps changing week by week even. So joining us tonight are three distinguished young speakers. Firstly, we have Jordan Ashton-Brigandi, is currently the Director of Development and Strategic Partnerships for UN Youth New South Wales. She has worked for numerous entities such as Amnesty International, members of Parliament, local government and community sport organisations. She's proudly from the Western Sydney community. I was born in Western Sydney, so I'm proud there as well. And she endeavours to support initiatives which improve the quality of life for young people and families. Formerly, she's completed a Master of International Law and a Bachelor of International and Global Studies with specialisations in Government and International Relations and Social Policy with the University of Sydney. Additionally, she's completed academic studies in Portugal and Italy regarding refugee rights, geopolitical and strategic security, and international development. Now, Phil Craig is a social work graduate who has grown up, resided and worked in Western Sydney as well, an area where youth being disadvantaged in the labour market is not a new trend. Phil currently studies a Master of Psychotherapy and Counselling and is a strong advocate for mental health, currently working for Lifeline in Western Sydney. Growing up, Phil experienced the struggles of finding employment that worked around his studies. Phil believes that finding such a job is just the first step of the struggle, and the discussion also needs to include retaining employment outside of a short casual contract, being rostered enough hours to meet basic needs in a precarious labour market. Phil is also a strong promoter of self-care and always makes time for judo and running with his Basenji pup named Sengo? Correct me if I'm wrong later, Phil. Sengo, there we go. And finally, we have Natalie Shahada, who joined the social outfit team in 2020 as the official retail trainer. She works one-on-one with young people from refugee and new migrant communities, teaching retail skills with the goal to transition these young people into external paid employment. Natalie came to the social outfit with an 11-year career as an eco-stylist. She's also the founder of Tommy magazine, the destination for creative women with a conscience, as well as being the national retail eco-stylist for Save the Children Australia's op shops. She's a strong advocate for decolonising fashion, as well as raising awareness on the issues of intersectionality with environmentalism and representation within the sustainable fashion space. Social justice, equity and representation are also key issues within all facets of her work. So firstly, welcome Jordan, Phil and Natalie. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. First question I want to ask is, what skills do most youth need today and for the future? And Jordan, I'm going to open that up to you first.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you as well for having me, and I'm sure all of us will do our thank yous at some point. This is very exciting. So truthfully, what skills young people need, I think the one I've run into the most that is beneficial would be interpersonal skills. And I know, I'm very aware that's not an easy thing for every person to achieve. I'm someone who's naturally extroverted, which is something that helps me do what I do as the Director of Development as well. I'm constantly talking to people, I'm constantly meeting people and just building a connection with them. These days, that is showing to be more valuable in terms of gaining employment than no matter how many degrees you have, no matter what your, what marks you got at uni, but essentially that you've made connections, you've helped chatted with people, and that's just your kind of backup. So if someone does offer you a position, they can go, oh, you're trained? Excellent. But the job search for a lot of young people, that's the most difficult part, essentially, is getting to the interviews or even getting your application looked at. So I think the networking, as you hear the old saying, it's who you know, it's also what you know. But if you're not out there talking to people and being able to build those skills, it puts you automatically in a disadvantage. I think as well, having a strong kind of work ethic and taking initiative are probably the two most beneficial, because they're transferable across whatever industry you're in. All three of us are in completely different fields, which I think is excellent, because you get a nice whole well-rounded perception of this issue. But being able to take initiative and building interpersonal skills, there's something that applies to any career.
It's fascinating you talk about interpersonal skills, because the more you talk about it, it makes me reflect on my start. Having a degree is one thing, but getting your foot through the door is another. Natalie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jordan. And I think, a lot of what I guess I'll share tonight will definitely come from the perspective of working with women specifically from the refugee and new migrant community who are between the ages of 18 and 29. And so I guess, when we're talking about those groups of women who have kind of just arrived in Australia or newly arrived in Australia, there are a lot of, I guess, obstacles to employment. And interpersonal skills is definitely something that I teach on the retail floor. Our environment is, retail training. So we offer a retail training program. I work one-on-one with these incredible young women. But I think one of the things that, is a barrier to employment are these interpersonal skills, because these women have been through a lot. And that's something that may not really be considered in the workplace. So it's really important that, these young women get that firsthand experience of being in a live environment, in a retail environment where they are kind of conversing with all different types of people. Our retail shop is right here in Newtown on King Street. So these young women are, having conversations with so many different people. And so those interpersonal skills, at the end of that kind of 12-week retail training program is something that is really key to each trainee that I work with, and something that they say is kind of one of their, most, I guess, one of the things that, they go away with that they didn't have at the beginning of the training program, and really that confidence as well. And I think Phil might be able to speak to this a little bit later on, but that kind of, self-worth and confidence, and really kind of believing in yourself, and really kind of being able to use your voice.
Finding your voice and knowing how to use it isn't particularly something you're taught in high school, which leads me to feel, I suppose, when you reflect on you're all youth. I'm just beyond that age bracket now, I think. But when you reflect on your time in high school, and even potentially your studies beyond that, what are the skills for life and work do you wish that you were taught then?
I think just to be prepared for an ever-changing society, where we have to be adaptable, and it's not as simple as, picking what we want to be and following that path. Life's going to throw some curveballs at us, as we're experiencing right now through this pandemic. So just that, taking our education seriously as a lifelong thing, not just to get us the job we want now, just to understand the world a bit more, and the part we want to play in that, I guess.
It's also really hard to expect every person by the age of 17 or 18 to know precisely what they want to do for the rest of their lives, which is a situation that most of us do face, whether you continue on to university or not. In terms of that, Natalie, I wanted to ask you, do you think there is an abundance of pressure on youth to upskill as early as possible, in terms of whether it's degrees or trade, rather than work on, say, interpersonal skills or life skills, rather?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And again, kind of in the context of, refugee and new migrant youth, there are a lot of, barriers to education as well. And that's something that's really important that we have to think about, when we're thinking larger scale. A lot of the women want to to have an education, want to go to university, but there are huge obstacles when you are, here on temporary visas and you're having to pay international student fees and all that kind of thing. So I think a lot of the time when these young women do arrive to Australia, a lot of the experience that they are engaging with is volunteer work, and that can be problematic in and of itself as well. And that's kind of a completely different conversation, because then that kind of opens up, whether it is really these women are getting these skills that are going to help them in the workforce, or is that an avenue for exploitation? So I think it's very important that young women are engaging in volunteer work, and they are, putting their hand up for things, which they most definitely are. But I think, it goes hand in hand. They also need to be able to have access to formal education as well.
Absolutely. The experience versus exploitation ratio is a common issue, and not to make it about myself, but as a budding journalist, that is a common issue. But speaking of volunteering and internships, Jordan, what skills that you I'm assuming you picked up skills during both. I suppose, what were they, and how important have you found them throughout your professional and life since?
So it was just like what skills that I've picked up that are valuable.
Precisely. What skills? Through volunteering, through internships, through the start of your professional working life.
Yes, that fun thing that we all do to try and get a career. Look, I think, it's very true, because I think I had I'm most recently starting a position that's actually relevant to what I studied. And I was speaking with the doctor who's taking me on as a research assistant, and she said to me, basically we ended up having this conversation, and she's like, actually, do you want to come and work on this with me? And I went, I wasn't expecting anything like that, and I thought maybe I just have to do some volunteering for you. And she says, no, we're human rights lawyers, we're against slave labor. And the way she said it, I'm like, that's very true, because it depends on what value the young person is getting from that volunteer opportunity. I understand in some cases, like for instance, what I do at United Nations Youth, we're all volunteers. We're all under 25. Our board of directors is, once you turn 25, you move on. I'm 22 and legally responsible for a charity according to the ACNC. And in that sense, that is a value. Like, that is a volunteer opportunity that actually adds value to my career, to my professional development, to my life. And it's actually served me better than some paid employments I've had or internships I've done, because it depends on what you're actually doing. One instance, I was basically filing and stuffing envelopes, and whilst that's very helpful, I know the place I was working at was quite appreciative of it, but in terms of a skill that I can take away and say to my next employer, I did all these things, filing isn't one of them. Like, that's not something that's going to help me truthfully get a job in the career that I'm in. So I'm in international affairs, I'm in policy, I'm in governance and relations and things like that. So I think truthfully the most valuable skills, being able to stick yourself in any situation and be okay, is potentially something that hard to explain, but the most valuable skill any, I think, young person can equip themselves with. Because as Phil was saying earlier, we don't know what's happening at any time. 3 months ago, we're all booking holidays and we're applying for positions that were open and available because the market was better. And now we're locked down again.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago, yes, even more, like even sooner. We've just, taken everything and flipped it upside down. So I think building that type of resilience and flexibility is one of the things I've learned that I hope other young people are able to do. And that just comes from getting out there. It comes from going to a situation and having to think on your feet and, oh, one thing's gone wrong, the next one's gone wrong, and you just got to problem solve, and you'll get better at it the next time you do it. And I think that's something that I hope other people are able to do, because I think it helps you personally as well. Like being able to cope with that little bit of pressure and stress from doing it in, no matter what, you could do this in retail and you have a customer that, you know, is unhappy and this is the situation you're applying to, or you could also apply this type of skill to a more, you know, complex, or, you know, I'm sure our politicians are doing this skill right now. They're just problem solving and hoping for the best for next time, where they get to reflect on their mistakes or what went well and go again and adapt to the new situation that comes up. I think, yeah, that's probably my best thing. That's a lot of that's come from UN Youth. You know, you're running summits, you're running events, you're on the exec, no matter what you're doing, there is something you've got to adapt to in the most loving and amazing way possible, because we all love it. And if you don't like it, then you won't, you know what I mean? You won't be able to get that value from it. But yeah.
Well, passion is such an important thing. But if you really think about it, as you said, a lot of our lives is conflict resolution. And that's so important. I mean, I probably would be a better husband if I knew how to conflict resolve better. I'm sure some would argue. That was a joke if my wife is watching. Just the next, I wanted to ask Phil, because you with Lifeline would do, as you, Natalie, would, I'm sure, deal with a lot of volunteers in your line of work, and hopefully achieving or helping them attain some sort of similarity to the skills that Jordan's referring to. But in terms of actually gaining employment from such work, there's research that's showing that youth that are not employed by the age of 22 lose confidence, their skills, they lose confidence in themselves, and they fall behind in employment. And then that obviously affects not just their mental well-being, but their wage and their ability to set themselves up for the life that they hope for themselves. How do you think we can and should encourage to support youth, Phil?
I think, you know, it's important to acknowledge that we don't live in the world our parents once did, you know, where it's you get fired from a job on a Friday, you walk into a new full-time job the next week. You know, the world's a very different place, and, you know, it's outside of just getting a job. It's retaining a job that's, you know, really difficult for a lot of people. I think, you know, there needs to be collaboration between the community, education and industry to sort of create these opportunities for young people. And obviously the focus needs to be on those most disadvantaged, to ensure, you know, there are opportunities there and that generational cycle of disadvantage doesn't continue.
I mean, this also falls in line with all three of you, having youth like yourselves in the positions that you're in to support other young people that are hoping to upskill in their profession, but also in life, and chase those passions and help. Natalie, what do you think can be done to help other young people facing the prospect of unemployment? And obviously you're tackling that on multiple fronts, not just youth, but people from even more vulnerable backgrounds as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Social Outfit, you know, we are one of Australia's most loved social enterprises and charities, and we do this really well. And to kind of refer back to what you were saying, Phil, it's all about collaboration, community, and creativity. And that's what we do at the Social Outfit. So I think for us, you know, the retail training program that we offer is an employment pathway, but it's a job readiness program. So it's not volunteer work, it's actually paid work experience. And so I think that's what differs in comparison to, you know, potentially other services that are available to youth outside of what we do here. So I think there needs to be that, you know, that I guess pathway to employment, but there also needs to be mentorship as well. And so that's something that we do really incredibly well at the social outfit, because it is one-on-one learning, but it is mentorship and guidance. And I think that's what kind of, you know, young people really need. And I find myself, I don't think I fit into the young person category anymore. But
I'll join that queue with you, don't worry.
What I found growing up too, and you know, I'm not from a refugee background, but you know, I so craved this mentorship and guidance, and especially as somebody that was venturing from what my chosen path was, which was, you know, I went to university, I did a commerce degree, thought that was, you know, the thing I was going to do, and really wanted to kind of break out of those cycles of poverty that I grew up in, and wanted to make, you know, a whole bunch of money, and thought that's how I was going to get out of this, you know, out of this cycle. And then I realized, actually, no, that's not what I like, and that's not what I want to do at all. And I wanted to, I guess, pursue a career in fashion. But there weren't any people that looked like me, that had my surname, that were in the fashion industry, and that could be a mentor or a guide to me. And so I feel, you know, something that I think is really lacking amongst youth in this country, especially, we see it very much, you know, in the US, is mentorship and guidance. And so that's something that we really offer at the Social Outfit. And whilst I am the retail trainer here, and I work with young women, I am a very hands-on mentor as well. You know, if the trainees need advice at kind of 10 o'clock at night because they've just realized they've got an interview tomorrow, I'm there and I'm on call. And I think that's something that, you know, with other kind of services and providers, if you've got, you know, a follow-up call on Friday, that's not soon enough. It needs to be now, if that makes sense. So there is that very kind of interactive, an interactive role that you know, people and mentors can play in these young people's lives as well.
Now, you've mentioned that there's a lacking of enough mentorships around the country. Do you think there's an absence to, you touched on it earlier about this idea of a paid work experience? I mean, it's not all associative of a person's value to be paid, but particularly with the people that you're working with, do you think that also helps improve not just their stability in life, but their mental state, that adds that bit of self-worth for their time and the work that they do? And do you think that's lacking as well?
Yeah, I think so, because I think when you get paid to do a job, it's very different to when you're volunteering to do a job. And I think, you know, you take pride in your work, but when someone sees you and hears you and knows your story and wants to pay you for your work, yes, that really contributes to your confidence and your mental health, and just your self-esteem and your self-worth. Absolutely. And I see the transition of young women, you know, when they start week 1 compared to week 12 at the end of the program, you know, they're not able to use their voice and kind of feel confident that they are even allowed to kind of speak and share their value and their worth. But by the time we've reached week 12, they're just so verbal and just, so definitely.
And I suppose just even getting to that stage of getting the foot in the door, Jordan, do you think that from high school or universities, any tertiary educations and those institutions, do you think they bear a responsibility to support young people in their search for work? And if so, how can they do more than what they do? I mean, Australia has some very esteemed and distinguished institutions that do a great job and teach us, but do you think that they can do more in this field?
In short, yes, because look, I know it's true. Truthfully, I know, for instance, universities, when I was in high school, our career advisor when I was in high school was always supportive of anybody and whatever pathway they wanted to choose, whether they wanted to go and do their child childcare certificate, whether they want to go into trade, whether they want to go to university, whether they just wanted to get a full-time job, and that was it. And she was always proactive in trying to secure scholarships for us. Particularly, we were, my school is listed on the low SES schools with the Australian government, so that automatically had us eligible. And she was always active in supporting if there was something we wanted to do, or helping us find it. In saying that was her as a person as well. It wasn't some formalized program that ensures that this happens for every young person at every school. In terms of universities, they're really helpful while you're still there. But like once you leave, I think they give you about a year. And technically you can't go back to the careers fair. You can't go back to all of these, use all these resources that is meant to help you in your job search. Whereas we're finding, I booked a session with careers counsellor, trying to see how I could improve my chances now that I'm finished uni. And they said, look, your resume is great, but you just need to get your foot in the door, keep your head up. It could take you a year and a bit. And I'm like, well, that's great to know, but a year and a bit while I'm looking for work, that's not exactly helpful. And, you're saying my applications are good. So kind of what's my problem here? And truthfully, I think they could do more in using past alumni connections, in being able to get people who are in places where they can help the people just finishing. For instance, I go to the University of Sydney, and the same is true for UTS, UNSW, Western Sydney Uni. Pretty much every university has alumni that are successful, or they are in a position to either do the mentoring, as Natalie was saying, because that is very valuable, particularly if you're fresh out of university, because you have all these skills and knowledge, but no one will give you a chance to apply them. And building that type of networking, either through doing an event or putting a call out potentially as well. Because I know a lot of young people are hungry to get their foot in the door of their career. You don't study, whether it's in high school, whether it's out of university, whether it's from TAFE, to do nothing with what you've studied. You want to get to the place you want to be and do what makes you happy. So every morning you get out and go, this is the career I want, and I'm doing it. But it's not enough just to give people a qualification anymore. Whereas surely there's got to be some workplace out there that wouldn't mind taking on an intern or things like that, and doing more programs to be able to get young people experience that is recognized and valuable, so that, or even just giving them a chance as just to get their foot in the door. Because I think that's what's truthfully lacking at the moment. Because if you Google on any university website, the Careers Hub will tell you how to write a cover letter, how to do your selection criteria, applicant response. You can write these until your fingers are blue or red, whatever the color is, but it's not enough anymore. Truthfully, it's not enough anymore. That's the sad part of it, that the best advice tertiary institutions can have is keep your head up, you'll get there. I'm sorry, that's not enough, especially with what's happening at the moment. In the current situation, we have a saturation of skilled workers in the workforce looking for jobs. And I understand it. A lot of people last year did lose their jobs, or they were demoted, or they've changed their career paths because of the pandemic. But if you are fresh out of university, you're going up against somebody who has 3-4 years experience, and you're not looked at. Or a lot of the jobs that you know for a fact as a person you are able to do them, you would do that job fantastically well, but it says 2 to 3 years experience as an entry level job. And you see memes on LinkedIn about it all the time, but it's truthfully just a knife in your back. You can feel the pain as a young person. I do it, I still am, where I'll look at a job applicant, whatever they're called, the documents that says what the job is, the advertisement, and it says, entry level, 4 years experience, and my heart drops because it would be the most perfect opportunity where I can showcase who I am and the skills I have and contribute to doing something meaningful to help people. But this is what I mean. That's automatically not even considered. So unless I think these issues are addressed, where universities play more of that more support in terms of transitioning, opposed to, tangible skills, we're going to continue to have young people who are unemployed or underemployed. Very importantly, that they might work a casual position that is mildly relevant to what they studied, but a casual position is not going to pay the bills or buy a house or start a family. And that's the sad reality of it. And
we're slowly dissecting an extremely complex issue and solving the world's problems one question at a time. This is such a really interesting and fascinating discussion. I'm really proud to be part of it. It's time for us just to take a short break. And during this time, we have a musical performance by Emily Coles.
Even in your arms, I feel scared, 'cause I know you're torn. Tell me if you want more, 'cause I don't want to waste my life. Tell me what you long for, 'cause I am now 25, and the wind blows so cold, I feel it down my spine. It travels slowly, so slow, it penetrates my mind, and I'm still cold, even in your arms. I feel scared, 'cause I know you're it penetrates my mind. I'm still cold, even in my home. And I wrap it up. It's still, don't feel right.
What a beautiful voice. That was the exceptionally talented Emily Coles with her rendition of Still Cold by Clear Soul. And for those of you wanting to know a little bit more about Emily, she's a music student and teacher from Newcastle, and also just demonstrated there the wide variety of skills in our Australian youth. And it goes to show and goes well beyond having this discussion about education in terms of high school and then university at TAFE. There are so many beautiful skills that go right across the board. And thank you again to Emily for that. Just continuing our discussion, Phil, wanted to ask you, we were talking about the notion of support for youth trying to get their foot in the door, but also getting the relevant skills that they want for their passions and to help others. We were talking about, Jordan was talking about educational institutions, but what about state and federal governments? I know this is, we're delving into the policy realm, but what do you think? You've seen it firsthand with your work in Western Sydney, but in terms of helping marginalised communities, what more support do you think they need?
I think we've seen that across this pandemic that it's affected different communities disproportionately. So if we look at Western Sydney as an example, young people living in certain pockets of Western Sydney have experienced disadvantage at a higher level than other areas of Sydney. So, even in city centre areas like Parramatta, youth unemployment sitting at nearly 16%, where we compare that to areas like the Sutherland Shire, where it's under 5%. So, targeting these areas where the problems really exist is really important in doing that. And I think it's the role of both the state and federal government to play their part. The JobKeeper subsidy that came in last year was, the difference in survival for a lot of households. But unfortunately, a lot of young people in their casual work situations weren't eligible for that sort of payment. So that saw them have to apply for other forms of support, such as youth allowance and things like that. So in May of last year, I believe the number of young people on youth allowance and on job seeker payments actually peaked, and it was up actually 70% from earlier that year. So without the federal government taking this seriously and supporting these people, there's literally no option for them to go forward, and without having money for basic needs like housing and food and clothing, how's one supposed to dress themselves up and look presentable to go to a job interview to gain employment?
So what kind of support do you think that looks like, Phil? Are you suggesting something similar to JobKeeper or something more targeted in terms of helping people maybe with wardrobe or with further skills to help them, maybe whether it's classes, or how do you see it playing out in an ideal scenario, obviously?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's, as I said before, giving the support to those that need it most, not shunning people for accessing these support services, like government payments when they're needed to maintain that basic standard of living. No one on a government payment is living a luxurious lifestyle, but often they're looked down upon, and these people that have their hand out. So in letting these payments continue for people that need them, and working with young people to work out what they want, what they need. Different populations, different cultural groups. We're going to have different ideas about what their goals are for their life. So rather than just being told what they need to do, they need to be included in that conversation as well.
Natalie, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess I have two perspectives of it. But I think, with these government payments as well, a lot of the time, these young people will have to have a certain threshold of how many jobs you're supposed to apply for per week. And like you were saying, Phil, it's not kind of a customized experience when you have these support workers and supervisors working with young people. It's just like, hey, go and try and find 5 jobs that are being advertised this week. It might be completely, irrelevant to what you want to do, your career, your skills, but it's just kind of to fulfill this, criteria. And so it does mean then that, you're probably more likely not to get those jobs because it's not in relation to anything that you're working towards. I guess the other thing I was going to say is in terms of funding and budgets and things like that, the social outfit has always kind of gotten much of its money through community fundraising and private donors. And so we've until just recently kind of never gotten any government funding. So it's really important as well that places like us have access to government funding, because we have the impact and we are actually changing young people's lives. So when we're thinking about that hierarchy, it's important for people like us and social enterprises like us to have access to funding as well. So that's just a bit of a different perspective.
Well, that kind of points to this issue about people entering the workforce into something that they're passionate about, and it points to our point earlier about work experience in fields that you're excited to develop in, whether that's more avenues to enter or value attached to that. But Jordan, in terms of helping people being steered in that direction to pursue their dreams rather than pursue some sense of stability, how do you think that's possible in the climate as it is, and also to inspire that sense of innovation?
That is a very difficult question, because
I'm known to do that, but I'm sorry.
No, well, it's perfectly valid, because how do you have hope when everything seems hopeless? And that is something that I think most people, no matter what stage of life at, need to keep within their hearts, that this will get better. And even if everything is telling you the opposite, you have to keep that mentality. Otherwise, you will start to really feel the effects of it. Feeling depressed, feeling helpless, and that unfortunately just digs you deeper. It's like quicksand. Pursuing a career and a passion, I think, starts from doing what you like. And that's, as in its essence, what it is. When I started university, even now that I'm finishing university, I never went into it with saying, I'm going to be the Prime Minister. I never said, I want to be the owner of the biggest business in Sydney. I didn't have that career job title in mind. And I still don't, truthfully. I don't know if that's a good thing, that I am flexible and open to change, or if it just means I'm wandering the planet for a bit longer. But I think in essence, to even finding something that you want to get out of bed in the morning for comes down to what you like. I like helping people. I like foreign affairs because I find them really interesting. I like talking to people and collaborating. I also like putting my head down and learning as much as humanly possible about whatever it is. So I'll put my head down and dive into the depths of international human rights law. I also find the social policy of Netherlands really fascinating. And that's just me. Right?
It's
That's
fascinating. It's a fascinating country.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? So I think that's kind of where it starts in being able to navigate this crazy world we're living in is, hi, I like these things. Where can I kind of do that? Because I picked my university degree. I liked arts. I did art, drama, English. I did French and Italian. I can't remember what else I did. Some other creative things. And I'm sitting here thinking, what am I going to do? And my friend punched me in the arm and said, Jordan, you like helping people and you speak 3 languages. Go do something. So I did a degree in international affairs because I thought that was interesting. And hasn't gone wrong for me yet, but it means that you still kind of have hope in your heart if you can find something you at least like, or whether it's, do you like soccer? Do you like painting? Do you like, just getting out and meeting people? Or if you're someone who really likes spreadsheets, I know a few people like that. I can't empathize, but they do. There is a place where you can do something that there is a thing you like, and there is a job. Who knows what the title is, but there are a fair few of them. If you break it down to its core, opposed to like pay isn't everything. Obviously, enough to pay the bills. That's an essential part of it. If you like, volunteering is important too, but that shouldn't. It has its own place. It's not something you can live off, but it isn't. I think it's important to your soul. But I think that's essentially what it comes down to. Keep doing things you like, and keep following that path. Probably my best advice.
I guess we all need a shot. We all need a shot in the arm, but in Jordan's case, it's a punch in the arm from a friend. The first thing that you said, "How do you have hope when all feels hopeless?" is incredibly poignant. And I wanted to just reiterate that. And that you touched on a really important subject matter, which is mental health, and there's no denying that work and life is really tied into that as a concept, as an issue, as a day-to-day. Now, Phil, when it comes to the stigmas around mental health and lack of employment for youth in some instances, and the casualisation of the workforce for younger Australians, these are all trends that we're seeing growing in an upward and negative fashion. How do you see that from your work? How do you see that differ for people from culturally and linguistically diverse communities?
Thanks.
How much worse is it?
That's a really good question. I think throughout this pandemic, the importance of social connectedness has really been highlighted as something that gets us through, and through not being able to engage in our regular employment and see the people that we see on a day-by-day basis, we've sort of realized how much we can take these things for granted. Worthwhile employment is something that I think is often, underpinned by Western ideals, very market-based, and it might actually undermine some of the cultural values that are held by some people. So, it's positive to see that money's put into programs to support, these young people. But I think that there's still a lack of consultation with these people to work out exactly what it is that they need and how they will feel most supported through this. So they need to be given a voice in this as well. So I think mental health services can be quite an alien thing to a lot of people. Mental health, and especially discussions about things like suicide, are hard conversations to have. But when we take cultural values into that conversation as well, it can be even more of a taboo topic in some communities. So I think the hardships of this pandemic have definitely been widespread, but I think there are definitely some communities feeling the negative effects more than others. International students are another perfect example. You know, they already face a number of inequities before the pandemic. You know, they're not eligible for student travel, Opal cards and things like that in New South Wales. And, you know, the restrictions are, around how many hours they can work and things like that is, you know, going to put them in a time of financial insecurity. You know, they're going to be the first people to lose their job, or, you know, not be able to gain employment because of that. So, you know, I think definitely, you know, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds and international students have taken the brunt of this a lot harder than, you know, other Australians.
Natalie, we have been touching on it a bit, but how do you see, through the work that you've done and are doing still with the social outfit, how do you see that gap truly being bridged?
I think the other thing that kind of, that both Jordan and Phil have touched on is, you know, when you are seeking support from people as well, it's really important that young people have others to talk to that can really understand their circumstance and may have actually, you know, may not, you know, have that firsthand experience, but somebody that kind of looks like them or is from a same kind of background, cultural background. And I know that's true for the work I do with the young trainees, because if, for example, they speak with somebody, you know, about mental health that may completely not understand their circumstance at all, it kind of somewhat seems tokenistic, if that makes sense. But if they're talking to somebody directly that understands their culture, they understand their traditions and why, you know, why X, Y, and Z happens, then that kind of makes the, I guess, the support more holistic as well. I don't know if that's answered your question.
No, absolutely. Well, it's so important not to use the broad brush approach with anyone, really, and for people of vulnerable backgrounds, even more so, I'd imagine you'd have seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think,
No, sorry. Look, there are a mountain of questions I still have. I think we have time for a few more. Jordan, you mentioned the difficulties in terms of getting entry-level jobs. There's so much competition. You're often being told to just persevere, you know, keep your head down or keep your head up or chin up, and all those different analogies to wait it out, and eventually you'll get a chance. But what are some of the other factors that you see barring people from taking on entry-level jobs, particularly when there are other industries like the arts, where opportunities are so limited too?
I think is one important thing to address is, what do we all consider entry-level jobs? Because in some circumstances, entry-level jobs in, you know, a professional career post-university, you know, that's where I go back to that joke of you need to have 3 years experience and things like that. Whereas if you're picking up a retail job in a local community or a shop, is that the bar for entry-level jobs? You know, is it something where you can come in and be trained on the job? Is that kind of the perspective as a society we're taking? Or in terms of entry-level, is it something where you have to be pretty much pre-trained, just not a lot of professional experience? I think that's kind of one of the issues that happens, is this definition or understanding problem of different types of work, different industries. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. But I know that particularly for a lot of young people, especially where I'm from, you could go in and you could work minimum wage at retail, and you could do 3 different jobs in retail at minimum wage, and maybe that's enough money for you to actually start progressing in life and whatever other goals you have, such as a house, for instance, the dream of anybody at the moment, I think. So I think that's kind of part of it. That's a big part of it as well, because it's much more accessible if you are a lower skilled or don't have a lot of different skills, to just walk in off the street and do whatever job that you can get that'll give you on the job training. But in terms of that, finding a passion and career and then going into the industries, like the arts doesn't have a lot of opportunities. There's always constant joke about the struggling artist that's, you know, tortured because they can't pay rent, but they love painting. This comes down to as well what we're also considering as an entry-level job, because most places aren't as willing to do on-the-job training anymore. I find that as, you know, speaking with grandparents, or I have a lot of elderly customers where I currently work, and they come in, you know, share their life stories, whereas you could come in with a couple of different skills that would be essential to them. They'll teach you the rest about the job. It's just you as a person can do this if you're trainable. Whereas that's evidently not the case if you're a university student. You know, if you're a university student leaving, there's this massive selection criteria. They expect you to come in fully prepared, well seasoned, and ready to do exactly what they want to do, reading their mind. They don't have time to teach. And that's a big issue in being able to actually address this for young people, particularly if you come from low SES communities. You know, I was in a situation once where I was chatting with lots of different people, and automatically they have a different set of life skills than what I did. And that's because, you know, they've got family or friends who have been in a particular field and have access to connections, skills, opportunities that are just not there if you're not from those type of backgrounds. And, you know, if you've got one, you know, parent who's in logistics and the other parent's in sales, how are you going to start your career in business, for instance? Because you don't have somebody in your immediate vicinity to help teach you. And if you can't get this training, so you are pre-trained essentially, so you can get the entry-level job, you're stuck. I think that's possibly the best way I can summarize it. I'm sure Phil and Natalie can pile onto this issue. We've opened up a can of worms.
Opening up a can of worms at the very end, Jordan. Probably not an ideal way. It's so important, as you said, because there are so many barriers from the start, but even once you enter. And I want to open up to final reflections. But Natalie, with the barriers of even getting into entry level, there's also the barriers of so many different. The job market being so environmentally unfriendly. So how would you say what avenues would you say there are for young people to not only enter into the workforce, but engage in ethical work that they are proud of?
Yeah, totally. I'm definitely going to answer that, but I just wanted to say, Jordan, too, you know, your perspective was talking about from, I guess, a university, you know, perspective of entry-level jobs. But in the situation of refugee and, you know, humanitarian migrants and women specifically, even getting that retail job is such a massive obstacle. You know, we have young women who have applied for 4 to 5 years to get a retail job, to work at a supermarket, to work at Woolies, to work at Kmart, and they get rejection on rejection on rejection. So I think there's so many different stages of what that looks like for youth and, you know, marginalized communities, because being able to even have that privilege of having 3 retail jobs would be amazing for these young women, and that's not something that is a reality for them. So there are so many different stages of, you know, and what that looks like for different youth. Going back to your question, Omar, the social enterprise, the social outfit is an amazing, I guess, benchmark for our young women, and to kind of educate and teach them and guide them on what a ethical workplace should look like, should encompass. And I have had, you know, definitely trainees who have entered the workforce, and because these employers know their circumstance, they understand their vulnerability, and they they try to take advantage of their situation, either by not paying, by, you know, not offering contracts. And so that's why what we do at the Social Outfit is super important, because we work with other partners like SSI, Settlement Services International, and the young women are actually offered masterclasses, training, mentorship, financial literacy courses to actually know their rights, to know their working rights. So they know, you know, they learn about taxation, they learn about superannuation, they learn about their employee rights, so that when they do enter the workforce, they're kind of like, oh, this is a red flag. No, I'm not going to engage with that. And they're able to then exercise their rights. That's also a very tricky thing when you're in a vulnerable situation, because knowing your rights and exercising your rights in a workplace when you've never worked before in a country that, you know, isn't your home country is very scary. So that's why, you know, with our retail training program, the support doesn't end at the end of the retail training program. It does, you know, the support is ongoing. So the trainees that work with us too, they very much have a strong sense of social justice. And so to come to Australia, they don't want to have to engage in exploitive work. They want to be able to work and trade their skills for a decent wage, a fair wage. So that's something that's definitely taught and inbuilt into all of the trainees as part of the program.
It just further demonstrates how incredibly nuanced and complex this issue of skills and youth employment is, that there's no one size fits all. And, you know, as you mentioned, entering one workforce might be seen as impossible for one person, is kind of overlooked by someone else as a backup option or the means to try and get them through their other goals. I think we might have time for final reflections. Phil, at the crux of it, if there was someone watching tonight or someone in that younger bracket, say there was an 18-year-old who's about to finish high school, not sure about life, which we all have as existential crises, but I suppose what would be the one thing that you would try and say to them to instill that sense of understanding or hope that there are ways to beat these obstacles or to get through them?
I guess that, as you said yourself, Omar, you know, it's quite normal to be feeling that way at that point in time. You know, it's an ever-changing world and we don't know where it's going to go going forward. But just do what you can to look after yourself throughout that process and ride that wave of change, you know. So young people are obviously, you know, way better at technology than a lot of the older generation. Use that to your advantage, you know, keep going with your startups and things like that. And, you know, they are our future.
Jordan, what do you think?
I might reflect on my heritage for this one. So there's a saying that really speaks with me. I'm Italian background. And there's a saying that has stuck with me for many years, la necessità aguzza l'ingegno, which loosely translates to, out of necessity, it will sharpen your wits. So this need, these situations that you're in, you'll become stronger from them. You will be smarter. You'll solve problems better. You will be more creative. That is possibly my only thing to kind of add that hasn't already been said tonight. That through this, and is painful now, out of this necessity, you will become stronger through it.
That's lovely. Another poignant line from Jordan. Natalie, this would be a common conversation I'd imagine you'd have at the Social Outfit. What do you often say to the women that are worried about all these countless obstacles that are often even more so for them?
Yeah, I think definitely similar to you, Jordan. You know, I think a lot of the time these young women think about their stories and their struggles as burdens, but actually they are the most incredibly resilient, wise, creative young people. And I always say, use your story, like use that struggle, use that pain, because you have made it this far, and that is more than most people would ever do in a whole lifetime. And so using that resilience and that strength, that is so important in life, but in the workplace as well. So I think when they kind of can see that from a different lens, it's what keeps them going and hopeful. Like you said, in a hopeless environment, sometimes it keeps them hopeful. And community is so important. Find your community. Find people that will support you and uplift you and raise you up and not bring you down. Community is really important. Yeah.
I think that's a really lovely way to wrap up what's been a very insightful conversation. Guys, I just wanted to say I'm blown away by the level of nuance and understanding, and I've learned so much from the three of you from our conversation this last hour or so. So I wanted to thank you all, Phil, Jordan, Natalie, and for our audience who've joined us tonight. I hope you've taken out of it as much as I have. I feel as though this is a good sign for the state of our country. If these are the youth that we have to represent us and bring in this new era. So once again, I wanted to thank you all. Finally, just to conclude, I'd like to call on Gulen Azrapolat, who's the Affinity Youth Representation, to make some closing remarks. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Omar. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to virtually celebrate World Youth Skills Days with all of you. Today commends the resilience and innovation of youth, particularly throughout the COVID-19 crisis. As discussed tonight, our primary goal is to improve socioeconomic conditions for youth facing unemployment and underemployment. It has been a great opportunity for reflection, sparking exciting innovation and demonstrating the power of youth. I'd like to sincerely thank our speakers, Jordan, Phil, and Natalie, for taking the time tonight and sharing their stories, as well as promoting and campaigning for a world where youth should never feel limited due to their circumstances. I'd also like to thank Omar for generously facilitating your first webinar, Steph for the warm welcome, and Emily for the delightful musical performance. Tonight's webinar has highlighted skills that are necessary today and in the future. Our distinguished speakers have discussed ways that youth can adapt their abilities to the pandemic and lockdowns, some solutions for how institutions can participate and help stakeholders to recover, and priorities for the post-COVID-19 world were also explored. It became clear that solutions and opportunities need to be reimagined in a way that considers not only the present time, but also the range of possibilities for our future. I believe that such discussions embody the resilience and innovation of youth through these challenging times. However, there is still much work to be done. Due to COVID-19, currently, more than 1 in 6 young people are out of work. In such a time when youth are called upon to contribute to the recovery effort, it is essential for us to be equipped with the skills to successfully manage any upcoming challenges. I think tonight it's become most evident that preparing youth for the workforce of the future is not only about facilitating high-quality schooling and higher education learning environments, but it also needs attention to technical and vocational learning. Collaboration, consultation, and problem-solving skills are only some of the many skills that have become critical and will hopefully continue to prove necessary throughout the recovery period. In essence, I think we need to focus on fostering youth employment and entrepreneurship, as well as promoting equity and gender equality for youth from all walks of life. I believe that without the full and effective participation of young people, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 will probably be a dream rather than a reality. We must try to do everything we can to facilitate to the contribution and innovation of youth by helping them adapt in these challenging times. I truly believe young fellows are ready to step up and take action to transform their communities and the world in positive and groundbreaking ways. If youth are to be empowered and supported to fulfill their fullest potential through accessible education and through a world where youth do not feel limited by their circumstances, our potential is truly endless. To conclude, I'd like to invite you all to a very special upcoming Affinity webinar in recognition of Nelson Mandela International Day, Interdependence and Internationalism, Imagining a Mandela Future. Joining from South Africa, Mr. Selo Hatang will be in conversation with Emeritus Professor Stuart Rees as they discuss the legacy of Nelson Mandela and recall his life's works. Facilitating this webinar is Cuz Philippa McDermott. If you enjoyed this webinar, please don't forget to like and subscribe and have a browse to Affinity's past webinars. We hope to virtually host you once again. Thank you and have a lovely evening.